Hi there. So I went a couple of weeks ago to the TLC conference, which was in San Francisco this year. So that's the TLC Foundation for Body Focused Repetitive Behaviors. And they had a national conference. About 500 people were there. And they have a lot going on. So I only got to 3 sessions because I gave 3 talks of my own. So I think I only got to 3 of the main sessions other than that. But I learned something in every one, so I thought I would share with you. So the first talk I went to was on willpower, actually, and it was very interesting. It was by Sue Price, who's an addictions counselor. So the talk was called Where There's a Will, Guidelines for Increasing Willpower. And she mostly talked about a book, The Willpower Instinct, how self-control works, why it matters, and what you can do to get more of it. So clearly this is interesting, right? If you want to stop picking, and start doing some positive behaviors. So actually, if you haven't heard my talk from the conference, it's on YouTube also. I will link to it. Yeah, I don't know if this changes what side, but yeah, upper right, you'll see it. In that talk, there we talk about making positive habits, and that is going to be very important. So the willpower talk, so this was so interesting. So there's a few components to willpower. So there's the power of I will do something, like, when in my positive habits talk, there are certain things that if you do, will be helpful in reducing your body focus, your BFRB. Then there's, of course, I won't power, which is the power, like, not to do the behavior, that kind of willpower. And we know, there's these kinds of willpower, they run out, and if you're thinking oh, I don't have enough willpower, don't think it's a failing on your part, because none of us naturally do have that kind of willpower, okay, which is where the habits come in. But so there's I will power, I won't power, and then the third, which is I want, which is the ability to remember what you really want. So this is really important to actually keep in mind what you really want long term, because what you want in the moment is very often just to feel better instantly, or to pick that, get rid of that bump or whatever it is, on your skin instantly. That's what you want. And you don't even think about the big picture that you really want to be free of this, right? So that's the last willpower, is of remembering what you want. And for that's, if you have my book and did that exercise, the pros and cons exercise, so that would be, the pros of not picking. That's why I suggest that you look at that each day, each morning really, because it reminds you of why, of all the things, all the benefits, all the things that you would like. What this author is saying is that willpower is actually an instinct that we have, but it gets disrupted by stress. So when we're stressed, that saps our energy and we don't have that natural willpower. One thing that's important is to recognize when you have choices and when you're going to be in a situation when you need willpower. Okay, so to realize, let's say before you're going into the bathroom, that you're going to be hitting a tricky situation for you. Okay, and so just being conscious of that actually helps. So that's not going to be the end of it, and I have videos with strategies. But there was a study of people online in McDonald's, and now they have, there are healthier choices at McDonald's, salads and whatnot. And people who were looking at the menu while they were online, they're looking and thinking and deciding, they actually were much more likely to order better choices or healthier choices. Whereas people who are on the line and looking at their phones, or just distracted from the fact that they have a choice in which they might exert willpower, they automatically defaulted to the less healthy choices. So I thought that was interesting. She talks about the fight or flight response, which is a stress response, right? But it's intense. It's meant to save us from intense danger back in the day when we really had some serious dangers, there could be a tiger there. In the fight or flight response, there's a lot of things that happen in our body. But the thing is that this response is getting triggered very frequently for us, and not from mortal danger, from things like traffic or work situations. This is really interesting. One of the things the fight or flight response does is inhibit our impulse control, which, if you think about it, makes total sense, because we want to go with that first impulse, that, whether it's to fight or to flee. If we're in big danger, why waste time analyzing? So the fight or flight response inhibits impulse control. But what that means is, under stress, we have less impulse control. And so we pick or pull or bite, whatever our BFRB is, we do more. So some of the key strategies, of course, like what I always talk about, are things that reduce your stress. Tapping, which is emotional freedom technique, meridian tapping, breathing exercises, yogic breathing, yoga, meditation. These are all things that work to get us out of fight or flight and into a sort of calm, focused state where we won't be so triggered to pick, and we'll have some impulse control. So really, anything that causes stress to the mind or body decreases our willpower. So that can be physical stress of what you're eating, what you're putting in your body, just being too sedentary, things like that. That could be emotional stress. Negative emotions are all associated with lower self-control. Anger, depression, anxiety, loneliness, all associated with lower self-control. Getting good sleep. So I'm just looking down the line at these things that are important. Meditation, exercise. So one of the cool things is that willpower is like a muscle. We actually can train it, and it's going to be much easier to train it, or you're going to be more successful to train it with something else rather than continually trying not to pick or pull your hair or whatever. So you can strengthen I won't power, right? Which it would be the power not to do a behavior that you don't want to do, but strengthen it with something a little bit easier or more innocuous, something very simple. So for example, if you have any habits of speech that you don't like for example, maybe you say like all the time, or or something like that, you can practice not saying that. That's how you can work on your I won't power. And this, actually, they've done research on this with, I thought this was fascinating, with domestic violence offenders, where they practiced something like this and they became less violent. They had less incidences of violence towards their spouses or whoever. So just exercising your willpower muscle in another way is really helpful. I never knew that. This is why I love this talk so much. This is definitely news to me. The other really great thing about this talk, or what I got out of this talk, is the difference between a focus on progress and a focus on commitment, and how much more important it is to focus on your commitment. How committed are you? Hey, just think about this for a moment. How committed are you to stopping your skin picking or hair pulling? Asking you this, getting you to focus on commitment, is actually much more helpful than a focus on progress. And one of the reasons of that is because when we focus on progress, there's this tendency to be like, oh, I've been so good lately, I've been making progress, and it causes us to fall off the progress. I've been doing well. I get lax. I give myself permission with those permission-giving thoughts, oh, I've been doing really well. I deserve just a little bit to pickle it all or whatever. That's the problem with progress. So really focusing on, I'm committed to reducing my behaviors, to stopping maybe eventually these behaviors. And that's something consistent, right? If you're always focused on commitment, it's very steady. Whereas if you're focused on progress, when you're doing well, you're like, oh, goody. When you're doing badly, you're discouraged. So you're either having a false positive where you might fall from, or you're really discouraged and it's hard to get yourself going again. So a focus on commitment is just very steady, and, over time you'll get where you want to go if you're committed. Anyway, so that's what I learned from that talk. Another talk I went to was the animal research talk by Joe Garner, who's a professor at Stanford. And he works with mice, and he's got a model. I mean, I think all this is published, but, it's still cool to talk about. But he's got a model for both, the model for trick or hair pulling in mice is very well established. It's like got so many similarities. And a lot of the talk was him showing like why, this is a good model, compares to trick in humans, all of this. So that was pretty interesting. Then the other part of the talk is the problem that mice have that is similar to skin picking. So mice in captivity for research, they often will start to scratch their skin rather than the hair pulling thing was barbering, where they'll bite off fur. The ulcerative dermatitis or UD, they scratch, and that's similar to picking. And, he found that trimming their toenails really stops. He said it didn't stop the behavior completely, but they're not damaging themselves anymore. I mean, this was a huge problem, causing infections in mice and probably, I think, deaths, and, was very, very expensive for people who do mouse research. One of the more interesting things, so he was talking about antioxidants for skin picking. So NAC and glutathione. Actually for skin picking and I think hair pulling, but maybe more the glutathione for skin picking for the ulcerative dermatitis mice. But one thing you mentioned that I thought was interesting was that the NAC works for PCOS very well. So I know there's quite a few people that, have skin picking that also have PCOS. So if that's you, you might find NAC helpful. He said it was as effective as metformin, but much fewer side effects. There's very minor side effects from NAC, and it's very safe. Over-the-counter supplement, that it has antioxidant capacity. Another thing that I thought was interesting, going back to the barbering, the mouse behavior that's kind of like hair pulling, he said many more female mice barber, just like many more females do hair pulling and skin picking. And there's been sort of a long-standing, possible reason that people propose for this is people just say like, oh, females are more likely to search for help, right? And to talk about this and to get help. But, mice, those mice aren't asking for help. They're just literally seeing, okay, there's like many more times. This really just occurs mostly in females and much fewer in males. Now, the barbering mice, so, which she established, like I said, is such a good model for trichotillomania, for compulsive hair pulling. And they have seen what genes are overexpressed in those mice. It is mostly genes that are involved in oxidative stress, including many of the most classic antioxidant genes. Antioxidant genes are overexpressed, so the mice are dealing with oxidative stress. And so he thinks that this is a major cause of skin picking and possibly hair pulling is oxidative stress, which is, what the NAC, if you take that, what that is probably doing is helping you with that. It's an antioxidant. Now, in the mice that have the skin-picking-like behavior, the UD, they found that the glutathione as an antioxidant is way more effective than NAC. Glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body, and they were increasing the glutathione in the brain using an intranasal glutathione, which is very, very expensive. So just taking glutathione, unfortunately right now, it's fairly prohibitive, and it's maybe not getting into the brain. I actually asked him if coffee enemas, so coffee enemas are supposed to increase glutathione in the body hundreds of times. And I asked him if he knows that, if that goes to the brain, but he did not know. So I think it's worth a try. Like, so if you know, if you're adventurous and want to look up coffee enemas, they're not so bad. They're not, I've done them before. You can look that up and try that, and maybe that will help, you know, because it's increasing glutathione. And yeah, let me know if it does. I'm very curious about that. So both NAC and glutathione were effective in the skin picking mice, but the glutathione worked faster. So the third talk I learned from was Dr. John Grant, who's a psychiatrist at the University of Chicago. And he's also the head of the scientific advisory board of TLC. His talk was about, it was trick and skin picking medications and nutraceuticals. So the things that I found interesting here is several years ago, they had done a study of fluoxetine and skin picking. So that's generic Prozac. And found that it was effective for skin picking, you know, over the, I think it was a 12-week trial. And now he actually thinks that the story is a little bit different. So interestingly, fluoxetine had no effectiveness in trichotillomania or hair pulling, which is very similar. In BDD or body dysmorphic disorder, fluoxetine is quite effective, and there's quite a bit of overlap between body BDD and skin picking. So some people, you know, BDD is like when you have distorted image of your appearance. And so for some people, like they think their skin is terrible, but it's really not, you know, but it is making them pick at it. And what he's saying is that that experiment was done before the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for skin picking, which rule out people that have BDD, that are picking from BDD. So he's thinking that if they did the experiment again, or probably, you know, he's seeing this in his patients, that it really doesn't have, that Prozac or fluoxetine does not have any effectiveness for skin picking unless you also have BDD, and then it can be helpful. Hope that's clear. So just FYI, if you want to talk to your doctor about that. Okay, the other thing I found very interesting about this talk was that they did a study of naltrexone for skin picking, and overall, on average, it was not effective. However, it seems that it was very effective in a few individuals, and those individuals had a history of alcoholism in the family. And I'm not sure if that included also personal history of alcoholism, but I would think that, you know, if you had a personal history of alcoholism, that the naltrexone might also be more effective for skin picking, just like it is for people with family history. So I thought this was quite interesting. So if you personally have skin picking and have a lot of alcoholism in your family, naltrexone might be something that could help you. This is a prescription medication, so you would have to talk to your doctor about that. He also talked about some upcoming research or research that's in progress for trichotillomania involving cannabinoids and milk thistle. So that should be interesting. Hey, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and please give this video a like if you found it helpful. And I will see you soon.